Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into the world of toxicology and substance abuse,
Okay.
but not like in a lecture hall kind of way.
Right.
We're going to be using real case studies from a paramedic textbook to kind of understand how those folks think on their feet when every second counts.
Yeah, that's right. We're essentially going to be training you
Right.
to approach these situations like a first responder would.
Exactly. Now, you might be thinking, why would I need that? But have you ever been in a situation where someone was having like a bad reaction to something?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe too much caffeine or even just mixing medications?
Sure.
Understanding the basics of toxicology can help you stay calm and know what to do,
Absolutely.
which can literally be life-saving.
And what's interesting is that toxicological emergencies aren't always about illegal drugs or anything like that.
Right.
It could be something as simple as accidentally taking too much of a common over-the-counter medication.
Yeah. Okay, let's dive into our first case. Imagine this. You're at the gym, and you see someone collapse near the weights.
Oh, jeez.
That's Jean-Guy in our first scenario. He's a middle-aged guy, conscious but confused, and his skin is flushed.
Okay.
We learn he has a history of fainting spells while lifting weights.
Yeah,
Already a few red flags, right?
definitely. And then you check his vitals.
Oh boy.
Blood pressure is sky-high, heart's racing like crazy.
Oh, wow.
Next to them are a couple of empty energy drink cans,
Oh.
which immediately raises a question for me.
Right, like how much caffeine did this guy have?
Exactly.
But there's another twist. Jean-Guy admits to taking some energy pills before his workout.
Interesting.
Now, I know those supplements are popular,
Yeah.
but are they really safe?
That's where things get tricky. You see, some of these supplements contain ingredients like ephedra,
Okay.
which can have serious side effects on their own. But when you combine them with the caffeine from energy drinks,
You're in trouble.
you're essentially putting your cardiovascular system into overdrive.
Mm-hmm.
That explains Jean-Guy's high blood pressure and rapid heart rate.
So it's not just about the individual substances, but also how they interact.
Exactly.
It's kind of like a dangerous cocktail.
Exactly. And what's really concerning is how common this combination is.
Yeah.
People often don't realize the potential risks they're taking by mixing these substances.
It's a good reminder to always read labels and be aware of what you're putting into your body.
Absolutely.
And to think we're only on our first case.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Tammy.
Right.
This case highlights a different kind of toxicological emergency, one that's driven by emotional distress.
Okay.
We find Tammy on a couch, distraught and confused. She's been crying, feeling weak, and admits to taking a bunch of pills after a bad breakup.
Wow.
The empty pill bottle nearby is labeled orthotricycline low,
Okay.
which are birth control pills. Now, while a large amount of birth control pills isn't usually fatal,
Right.
it can still lead to serious complications. We might see nausea, vomiting, and even blood clots.
Yeah, that's right.
It's heartbreaking to think that someone would feel so desperate to take that kind of risk with their health.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that emotional well-being plays a huge role in these situations.
It's a crucial reminder that mental health and substance use are often intertwined.
Right.
Sometimes the substance is a way of coping with emotional pain,
Yeah.
but it can lead to even bigger problems down the road.
It's a vicious cycle.
Mhm.
And speaking of cycles, our next case brings us to Jeremy,
Okay.
who's experiencing a completely different kind of toxicological crisis. This one's less about emotional distress and more about well pain.
All right.
Jeremy is found clutching his stomach, pale and sweating.
Yeah.
He's complaining of intense stomach pain, and alarmingly, he's vomiting blood.
Oh, geez.
Yikes!
That doesn't sound good.
What caused this?
He reveals he took a large amount of aspirin, a common over-the-counter pain reliever.
Wait, aspirin?
Hmm.
But that's in everyone's medicine cabinet. How can that be dangerous?
It's all about dosage. Aspirin, when taken in excess, can cause internal bleeding, which explains the blood in Jeremy's vomit. We also see his pulse is rapid and irregular, and his blood pressure is dropping.
Uh-oh.
Not good signs.
So what we're seeing here is that even seemingly harmless everyday substances can turn dangerous if misused or taken in excess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about understanding the potential risks and respecting the power of these substances. Now, before we move on, are you noticing any similarities between these cases so far?
Well, they all involve substances that seem pretty common. Energy drinks, birth control pills, aspirin.
Right.
You wouldn't necessarily think of those as dangerous.
And that's a great observation.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why toxicological emergencies can be so tricky.
Okay.
It's not always about illegal drugs or obvious poisons.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that anything can be harmful if not used responsibly.
Absolutely.
But how does this all connect to how our bodies actually react to these substances?
That's where things get really fascinating. Let's take a closer look at some of the major systems in the body and how they're affected. Think of your body like a complex machine with different systems all working together.
Okay.
When a substance enters the picture, it can disrupt those systems in various ways.
Okay, so let's break it down. Where should we start?
Um, let's start with the central nervous system, the command center of your body.
Okay.
This includes your brain and spinal cord.
The brain, the control center for pretty much everything we do.
Exactly. Substances can interfere with the way the brain sends and receives signals, affecting everything from mood and behavior to basic bodily functions like breathing.
So like in Tammy's case, the emotional distress she was feeling could have been amplified by the overdose.
That's a great connection. And remember Zhongai's confusion after mixing energy drinks and supplements.
Right.
That's another example of the central nervous system being affected.
It's amazing how one system can have such a widespread impact. What about the cardiovascular system? That's the heart and blood vessels, right?
Right. And this system is often a target for substances, especially stimulants.
Okay.
Think back to Zhongai's racing heart and high blood pressure.
Summer.
Those are classic signs of a stimulated cardiovascular system.
Makes sense. His heart was working overtime trying to keep up with all that extra energy.
Exactly. And on the flip side, some substances can depress the cardiovascular system, leading to a dangerously slow heart rate and low blood pressure.
Okay, so we've got the brain and the heart.
Right.
What's the third system we should be thinking about?
The respiratory system responsible for breathing.
Right.
Substances can affect this system in a number of ways,
Okay.
either by speeding up breathing or slowing it down.
Okay.
Remember Tammy's shallow breathing?
Yes.
That could have been a result of the overdose affecting her respiratory system.
And Jeremy's rapid breathing, too.
Exactly.
So basically, when someone is experiencing a toxicological emergency, it's like a domino effect.
Yeah,
One system gets hit, and it can trigger problems throughout the body.
you've got it. And that's why understanding these systems is so important for paramedics in the field.
Right.
They need to be able to quickly assess the situation and figure out which systems are being affected.
It sounds like they're playing a high-stakes game of medical detective. How do they even begin to approach these emergencies? I mean, there are so many potential substances out there.
It's all about observation information gathering and connecting the dots. Paramedics are trained to be incredibly observant, taking in everything from the patient's appearance and behavior to the surrounding environment.
So they're not just looking at the patient, but also at the bigger picture?
Yeah.
Kind of like Sherlock Holmes searching for clues?
Exactly.
Huh.
They'll look for things like medication bottles, drug paraphernalia, or even chemical spills.
Yeah.
They'll also talk to bystanders, family members, or anyone who might be able to provide information about what happened.
And then there are the vital signs, which we've already talked about.
Mhm.
Those seem to be crucial in these situations.
Absolutely. Vital signs like heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and even pupil size can tell us a lot about what's going on inside the body.
It's amazing how much information paramedics can glean from those simple measurements.
It's all about recognizing patterns and deviations from the norm. A rapid heart rate could indicate stimulant use,
Okay.
while constricted pupils might suggest opioid involvement.
Interesting.
Paramedics use this information, along with their knowledge of toxicology, to guide their treatment decisions.
Okay, so let's talk about treatment. What can paramedics actually do in the field for these emergencies?
That's a great question. The treatment really depends on the specific substance involved and the severity of the situation. Sometimes the most important thing is to provide supportive care.
Supportive care, what does that mean?
It means ensuring the patient has a clear airway, providing supplemental oxygen if needed, and closely monitoring their vital signs.
So basically keeping them stable until they can get to the hospital.
Exactly. But in more serious cases, paramedics might need to administer specific antidotes.
Antidotes, like an antidote for a snake bite.
Yes, exactly. For example, naloxone is a powerful antidote for opioid overdoses.
Okay.
It can rapidly reverse the effects of opioids like heroin or fentanyl.
Naloxone, that's one we hear about a lot in the news,
Yeah.
especially with the opioid crisis.
That's right. It's becoming increasingly important as a harm reduction tool and can truly be a lifesaver in those situations. But it's crucial to remember that not every overdose has a specific antidote.
So what happens in those cases?
Paramedics focus on managing the symptoms and supporting the body's natural detoxification processes. They might administer fluids intravenously to help flush the substance from the system, or medications to control seizures or vomiting.
Wow, it sounds like paramedics have to be incredibly adaptable and resourceful in these situations.
They absolutely do. They're essentially mobile intensive care units equipped to handle a wide range of medical emergencies.
It makes you appreciate the critical role they play in our healthcare system. They're often the first on the scene, and their quick thinking and expertise can make all the difference.
They are truly unsung heroes. Their work is often challenging and high pressure, but they're dedicated to saving lives.
Okay, I have to ask, what's one of the most memorable or unusual toxicological emergencies you've encountered in your career?
Oh.
There must be some wild stories.
Well, the one case that sticks with me involved a young man who was found unconscious in a park.
Okay.
His symptoms were unusual. Extremely high body temperature, dilated pupils, and he was acting very agitated.
Sounds like a scene straight out of a movie.
It did feel a bit surreal.
Right.
We suspected an overdose, but we couldn't figure out the substance. We started with basic life support, making sure he was breathing and getting oxygen.
Okay.
Then while transporting him, we noticed a small surgical scar on his abdomen.
Wait, a surgical scar?
Yeah.
How did that help?
It was a clue. He'd recently had his appendix removed.
Oh.
We realized he might be reacting badly to one of his prescribed medications.
So the scar was like a hidden message pointing you in the right direction?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it highlights just how important observation is in these cases.
It's like solving a medical mystery. Did the patient recover?
He did.
Oh.
Once we relayed this information to the hospital, they were able to provide targeted treatment. It was a great reminder of how vital communication is between paramedics and hospital staff.
It's amazing how these seemingly small details can make such a big difference. Okay, so we've talked about the science, the assessments, and the treatments, but I think we need to address the elephant in the room,
Yeah,
the opioid crisis.
you're absolutely right. It's a major public health crisis, and it's something we can't ignore.
Exactly. So let's talk about fentanyl. It seems to be at the center of many of the headlines these days. Why is this particular opioid so dangerous?
Well, for starters, fentanyl is incredibly potent. We're talking 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine.
Whoa, that's scary powerful.
It is. And what makes it even more dangerous is that it's often laced into other drugs,
Oh, wow.
sometimes without the user's knowledge. Someone might think they're taking heroin or a prescription painkiller, but they're actually getting a dose of fentanyl that's potentially lethal.
That's terrifying. It's like playing Russian roulette with your life.
It's a huge problem. Let's go through a scenario involving fentanyl. A young man is found unconscious in his apartment. His friend calls 911 and he's barely breathing.
Sounds like a classic opioid overdose. What did the paramedics do?
They immediately suspected an opioid overdose. They saw the telltale signs, shallow breathing, pinpoint pupils, slow heart rate. They administered naloxone.
Oh, wait.
But here's the thing. It took multiple doses to revive him.
Multiple doses. Why was that?
Because fentanyl is so potent, it can take a much higher dose of naloxone to counteract its effects.
Oh, wow.
That's why it's crucial to have naloxone readily available and to administer it quickly in suspected fentanyl overdoses.
This is all pretty intense. It's clear that fentanyl is a game changer in the world of toxicological emergencies.
Absolutely. And it highlights the need for greater awareness,
Yeah.
harm reduction strategies, and readily available access to naloxone.
I think you just transitioned us perfectly into the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Let's talk more about harm reduction and what it means in the context of substance use.
All right. So harm reduction,
Yeah.
what does that look like in action?
Yeah, it feels like a bit of a controversial topic.
Yeah.
But clearly something needs to change, especially with this fentanyl crisis.
Yeah, harm reduction is really about practicality over judgment. We know substance use exists, and the goal is to minimize the negative consequences that come with it.
Okay.
And it's important to remember harm reduction isn't one size fits all.
Right.
It's about finding the right strategies for different individuals and communities.
So walk me through some examples. What kind of strategies are we talking about?
Well, one that's been around for a while is needle exchange programs.
Okay.
They provide sterile needles to people who inject drugs,
Right.
which directly reduces the risk of transmitting diseases like HIV and hepatitis C.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
It's a simple way to prevent a much bigger problem.
Exactly. Another harm reduction strategy that's gained traction is safe consumption sites, sometimes called supervised injection facilities.
I've heard about those. Aren't they kind of controversial?
They can be,
Yeah.
yes,
Sure.
but the idea is to provide a safe, hygienic environment for people to use drugs under medical supervision.
Right.
If someone overdoses, there's help immediately available.
So it's kind of like having a safety net there just in case things go wrong.
That's a good way to put it. And it's not just about preventing overdoses. Safe consumption sites also offer an opportunity to connect people with health and social services like addiction treatment or housing support.
So it really is a wraparound type of support system.
Exactly.
It sounds like harm reduction is about meeting people where they are and offering support without judgment.
That's the heart of it.
Mm.
It's about recognizing the humanity of people who use drugs and offering them a pathway to a healthier life.
This all makes sense to me, but I'm sure there are still people who are hesitant about harm reduction. What are some of the common misconceptions or challenges?
The biggest hurdle is often stigma.
Okay,
Some people believe that harm reduction enable or encourages drug use.
but that's not the goal at all, right? It's about minimizing harm, not promoting drug use.
Exactly. It's about shifting the focus from judgment to compassion and recognizing that addiction is a complex health issue, not a moral failing.
I think sometimes we forget that people who use drugs are just that people, they have their own stories, their own struggles, and they deserve support and understanding.
Absolutely. We need to have more open and honest conversations about substance use in our society. We need to move beyond fear and prejudice and embrace evidence-based approaches that prioritize health and well-being.
Well, I think we've covered an incredible amount of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We've explored the science behind toxicological emergencies, we've examined real-life scenarios, and we've even delved into the complexities of the opioid crisis and harm reduction.
And how paramedics and medical professionals respond, and how important it is to have a multifaceted approach to addressing substance use in our communities.
Listeners, as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave you with this thought. Substance use and abuse are complex challenges, and there are no easy solutions. But by fostering understanding, embracing compassion, and supporting harm reduction initiatives, we can create a safer and more supportive environment for everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay compassionate.
So we're talking harm reduction. What does that look like in action? It feels like a bit of a controversial topic,
Yeah.
but clearly something needs to change, especially with this fentanyl crisis.
Yeah, harm reduction is really about practicality over judgment.
Okay.
We know substance use exists, and the goal is to minimize the negative consequences that come with it.
Right.
And it's important to remember, harm reduction isn't one size fits all. It's about finding the right strategies for different individuals and communities.
So walk me through some examples. What kind of strategies are we talking about?
Well, one that's been around for a while is needle exchange programs.
Okay.
They provide sterile needles to people who inject drugs,
Right.
which directly reduces the risk of transmitting diseases like HIV and hepatitis C.
That makes sense. It's a simple way to prevent a much bigger problem.
Exactly. Another harm reduction strategy that's gained traction is safe consumption sites, sometimes called supervised injection facilities.
I've heard about those. Aren't they kind of controversial?
They can be, yes. But the idea is to provide a safe, hygienic environment for people to use drugs under medical supervision.
Right.
If someone overdoses, there's help immediately available.
So it's kind of like having a safety net there just in case things go wrong.
That's a good way to put it. And it's not just about preventing overdoses. Safe consumption sites also offer an opportunity to connect people with health and social services, like addiction treatment or housing support.
So it really is a wraparound type of support system.
Exactly.
It sounds like harm reduction is about meeting people where they are and offering support without judgment.
That's the heart of it. It's about recognizing the humanity of people who use drugs and offering them a pathway to a healthier life.
This all makes sense to me, but I'm sure there are still people who are hesitant about harm reduction. What are some of the common misconceptions or challenges?
The biggest hurdle is often stigma.
Okay,
Some people believe that harm reduction enables or encourages drug use.
but that's not the goal at all, right? It's about minimizing harm, not promoting drug use.
Exactly. It's about shifting the focus from judgment to compassion and recognizing that addiction is a complex health issue, not a moral failing.
I think sometimes we forget that people who use drugs are just that people.
I
They have
think-
their own stories, their own struggles, and they deserve support and understanding.
Absolutely. We need to have more open and honest conversations about substance use in our society. We need to move beyond fear and prejudice and embrace evidence-based approaches that prioritize health and well-being.
Well, I think we've covered an incredible amount of ground in this deep dive. We've explored the science behind toxicological emergencies, we've examined real-life scenarios, and we've even delved into the complexities of the opioid crisis and harm reduction.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Thanks for walking us through all of this. It's so important for people to have this knowledge and to feel empowered to act if they ever encounter a situation like one of the ones we discussed.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. And remember, folks, if you or someone you know is struggling with substance use, there are resources available. Don't hesitate to reach out for help.
That's right. There's no shame in seeking support. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of toxicology and substance abuse. We'll see you next time.
Stay safe, everyone.